Hello, I'd like to talk about Wallingford Fire Department's operational capabilities using the example of a residential house fire. According to the National Fire Protection Association, who set standards for fire department operations nationwide, communities like Wallingford with a population density of 1,000 people per square mile or more are required to provide 15 structural firefighters on the first alarm assignment to a residential house fire with 2 floors or less to arrive within the first 10 minutes of the incident. This is outlined in NFPA Standards 1710 and 1720. Wallingford's able to achieve this through the use of its volunteer firefighting workforce being added to or in addition to its on-duty career firefighting workforce. I've outlined 2 operational models or 2 operational postures on the whiteboard. July 2020 moving forward is Wallingford's current operational posture. Pre-July 2020 is also outlined for a comparison. Pre-July 2020, during the day, during the week, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. saw increased call volume, which was met with a surge in resources. You'll see a difference between the 2 models in that an additional ambulance, firefighter paramedic ambulance, and a rescue truck were added to address call volume. Rescue 3 originally contained a firefighter paramedic, possibly 2 firefighter paramedics, or a firefighter paramedic and a firefighter EMT. That changed during the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. Resources were dropped down on Rescue 3 to 1 member, a single firefighter paramedic. We're not sure why that happened. We didn't receive a memo. There was no discussion as to why or when that was going to happen. We just noticed one day that trucks started showing up with just 1 member on it, which was odd to us, number 1, during a pandemic, but 2, to send that member out during a pandemic on their own to incidents where they may be out on their own for quite some time or a period of time waiting for additional resources. So we found that odd. So the operational capability went from 15 structural firefighters plus Car 4, who's a battalion chief, in charge of fireground operations, but can be added in an emergent situation to firefighting manpower. But I called it 15 firefighters reduced to 14 available firefighters with a reduction in staffing to end with Rescue 3. The night model, 6 p.m. to 8 a.m., Monday through Friday, and then on weekends, so the night and weekend model, saw a manpower of 11 certified firefighters plus Car 4. So you don't see the second firefighter paramedic ambulance or Rescue 3 on the evening shift because calls weren't as, there wasn't such a high call volume. Plus during the evenings, their volunteer firefighters or the volunteer firefighting workforce, volunteer firefighters in EMS, were available in more frequent numbers because most volunteers work day jobs. So there are more volunteers around during the evenings. There are volunteers who work nights and swing shift that are around during the day, but the numbers are much more frequent during the evening shift. So it worked out well having a surge in resources during the day and then reducing a little bit during the evening and augmenting with more volunteers that were available. And we saw in this model, the engine companies went out of service a lot less because they weren't providing paramedic resources to the ambulance because the ambulances both had paramedic resources on them as well as Rescue 3 during the day. So moving forward to the July 2020 posture, you'll see a reduction in paramedic level service in the elimination of Rescue 3. It's no longer staffed on any shift. It can be called in extra and staffed with overtime. The truck still exists in the inventory, but it's not staffed during a regular shift. And the elimination of both firefighter paramedic ambulances reduced in level to EMT no firefighter capability ambulances. I'm not saying that to be derogatory or negative. The EMTs that are running the ambulances now are great. I had the opportunity to work with several of them before I left the department in July, and I thought they were awesome. The firefighter paramedic FTOs that trained them brought them up to speed. They did a great job with them. I would trust these folks in my home taking care of my family. When I say it's a reduction in service, I mean it was reduced from a paramedic level service to an EMT level service. What that means is when you call 911 for service and you get an ambulance, when it leaves the station to respond to you, you're guaranteed to get EMTs. You're not guaranteed to get paramedics. If there's a paramedic available from a fire engine or from another resource, then it can be upgraded, but you're not guaranteed to get that. So an additional engine was added in the new response posture with personnel that were taken off or downgraded from the 2 firefighter paramedic ambulances and Rescue 3. And we also saw a reduction in the level of personnel on Truck 1, going from 3 personnel in the old posture, in both sides of the old posture, to 2. So they took the fire officer off Truck 1 and put it on Engine 3. So Engine 1, Engine 2 have 3 personnel, Engine 3 have 4 personnel, with the inclusion of the officer from Truck 1. Truck 1's reduced to 2, and you still have the battalion chief. 12 firefighters available, plus the battalion chief. Emergent situations that chief can pack up and do firefighting operations. What we're seeing more now is a reduction in available firefighting resources as well, because EMT level ambulances are responding to EMT level calls that are upgraded to paramedic level calls, or just straight paramedic level calls with an engine company. When treatment is needed at an ALS level, they're taking the paramedic from the engine on the ambulance and transporting to the hospital, and that truck is out of service. So that happens several times. Well, it happens often during the week as I listen to the radio since I left, that engines, and sometimes multiple engines, will go out of service at the same time because they're sending their paramedics in more frequent situations to the hospital with Wallingford's BLS ambulances. Say you get a third medical in town that ends up being an ALS ambulance, and maybe a contract company like Hunters or AMR don't have ALS or a paramedic available, then you're stripping your third engine of the paramedic. So it's reducing firefighter resources much more than it was in the past, and we've reduced medical resources in a paramedic level system to more EMT based system, and we're seeing more of a reduction in fire protection services to go along with that. So that was confusing to us, why in a town that was recently cited in a, I think it was a Record Journal article as doing mostly EMS based system calls, like around 80% medical calls, why we've reduced our medical capabilities at the same time as noting that we do more medical calls than fire calls. So what does this mean for the volunteer service? Volunteers are going to be even more critical in the new model because we're seeing engine companies down more often, and staffing is reduced down during the daytime. We're not surging resources anymore. So volunteer attrition levels are even more concerning, especially to me as a private citizen now, being here to utilize these services. So my posture on this is if we continue to allow volunteer resources to attrition out without addressing them, as we've seen for the past 5 or 6 years, eventually they're going to go away or be reduced to a level where they're just totally ineffective. Where does that leave Wallingford? We're going to have to either raise taxes to hire more career staff to increase tax burden on the taxpayer and the citizens, or we're going to have to rely more heavily on mutual aid assignments or mutual aid requests to other communities, which isn't a great it's not a guarantee, it's not a great method to fill the NFPA standards of, say, 15 firefighters to a residential house fire, 2 floors or less, because you never know what you're going to get. The community you're calling for help may have their own high call volume or their own fires going on, or maybe it's a weather emergency. You never know what you're going to get, and you can't rely on calling and asking for those resources because you don't know if they're going to be able to send them to you. So I don't see why we wouldn't, me personally, in my opinion, invest the money we need to into bringing sustainability back to the volunteer ranks, rather than continuing to let it go unaddressed and see the volunteer ranks reduce as we've seen over time, and eventually remain unsustainable and possibly go away or become ineffective. So hopefully this information is good food for thought. Maybe it fills in some gaps in information out there in the community that hadn't been talked about before. If you have questions, or if you see something in here you want to elaborate on, or if you see something that you think maybe I've misrepresented, please let me know, and we'll have a discussion and talk about it, and we can correct anything that needs to be correct. But I think I've laid it out pretty factually. I hope this information is pertinent and everybody gets something out of it. Let me know if you have any questions, and thank you for your time.